Welcome to the Victoria Stadium in Gibraltar, where the Republic of Ireland have beaten Gibraltar 1-0 in their opening Euro 2020 qualifier. But really, that is not the story this evening, because after a 14-year reign, John Delaney is no longer CEO of the FAI. It has been a dramatic and intriguing afternoon of behind-the-scenes action at boardroom level across the FAI. There had been intense speculation throughout the day that maybe John Delaney was set to resign in the wake of the revelations of this €100,000 bridging loan he made to the FAI. In the end, though, Delaney hasn't resigned. In fact, he's just left his role as CEO and moved to the newly created role of Executive Vice President. The FAI have issued a 1,898-word statement cataloguing the changes to the board that are being made after an independent review. The Chief Operating Officer, Rea Walshe, who's quite a new appointment, she's actually going to take over as the Interim CEO as the FAI go in search of who will ultimately be John Delaney's replacement. Daniel MacDonald of the Irish Independent is with me. What a day. What do you make of it all? Explain the 1,800-word statement.
That might take a while. It's a bit windy, winds of change. You can use all these great phrases, and yet after 1,883 words or 1,898 words or whatever it is, are we really any wiser about what happens from here? Or more to the point, does this deliver clarity on what happens going forward in terms of the FAI's direction at the top? I know that the FAI statement, it's a significant part of their statement is to suggest that this review was commissioned in February, that they didn't say it's not related to recent events, but the implication in their statement is effectively that's what they're trying to say.
The suggestion seems to be that it's not related to recent events, but maybe it was brought forward because of recent events.
Well, they also say that it was adopted at a board meeting yesterday. Adopted unanimously at a board meeting yesterday. So if something is in train yet, they sat down yesterday, they say, to ratify these changes. So,
and a lot of that board would have been here in Gibraltar.
Yes, they would have. Yeah, maybe some people not here, but there's modern ways of being involved in a board meeting and so on. So we don't really know about the detail of that aspect of things. But ultimately, I suppose people step back and read this, or if they can try and read the 800 words and look for a quick summary. It's that John Delaney, they say, is still going to be involved, in terms of the decision-making process within the FAI. He may not be sitting on the board anymore. It is still, I suppose, in terms of symbolism, it's a massive change, that he's been CEO for 14 years and he's moving on from that position. But, you are right. There was obviously a lot of speculation throughout the game, throughout the day, then before the game. And as with all these things, you have to be very careful because, definitive statements were made, which were definitely doing the rounds at sort of reliable and well-sourced levels. But ultimately, there was always that element of, this FAI business may not always be straightforward in terms of how things play themselves out, and that was certainly the tone, I suppose, that changed even as the game was going on. There was probably suggestions that what was coming down the tracks wasn't as straightforward as maybe some of the reports and chatter and speculation earlier on, which seems to be more definitive. I think the line was used that there might be a twist of some kind, and Executive Vice President is the twist, although again the FAI will say, well, this was happening all along anyway, so it's not as if this is something that's changed this evening.
You had this bizarre situation where the match was ongoing behind us. The director's box where all the FAI officials were sitting was between the two sides of the media benches, and most people in the media aren't watching the match. They're seeing, is John Delaney in his seat? Wasn't actually in his seat for Jeff Hendrick's goal. He'd gone out on the phone. He was back in later on. Ultimately, John Delaney is gone as CEO, which is what a lot of people in Irish football wanted, but he remains on, and from reading that statement, he remains a key figure within the FAI, just not as CEO.
Yeah, so I think I'm looking at the reaction to this statement, because ultimately, it's the FAI will say that it serves its members, or the people's game line has been used by a couple of people in recent weeks, maybe from outside the FAI. But I'm looking at the reaction to it, the reaction from the public, the reaction probably politically in light of ongoing events, and people don't seem to be entirely satisfied by this solution. Though I'm not sure if it's a case of, well, that's it, done now, and we digest these changes. But it's really impossible to analyse because he remains there and he's been such a powerful figure within in Irish football for so long, it's very hard to analyse what this change means in terms of his impact, because I guess when he's still involved in association decision making, you're not talking about a new era then. You know, like it's a new, like this is a new era for Mick McCarthy because Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane and his staff aren't here. A new era for the FAI would involve significant changes in terms of not just with regard to John Delaney, but also with regard to the other long-serving board members. Now, I know there was changes coming down the tracks in that regard due to term limits and stuff that's been enforced in them. So the argument could be made, well, looking in 2023, you're going to have a completely new era. I take that point, but I guess when John Delaney is still there, that's not going to satisfy a lot of people who don't want him there.
This was as a result of a review that had been ongoing, and obviously the end of that was that there should be a realigning of roles within the organisation. So John Delaney moves to a new role. Because he's not resigning and because this is something that was in train, the FAI obviously would want to keep an employee of such importance and experience within the organisation. So maybe it's not that surprising. The question will be what CEO will want to come in and work alongside the previous CEO still there, having this new role that carries such power.
Yeah, I mean, you've almost answered that question, you know, in terms of with the question. I think you've posed very valid questions there, and I think that is the scenario here. There's more questions really that are raised from this. I mean, one of the points I've made the point that, you know, John Delaney's role in UEFA is obviously very important. To remain on the UEFA Executive Committee, you need to retain active office, you know, within your member association when it comes to election time, the next election when that comes. So people say, well, look, why is he executive vice president? I mean, executive vice president sort of reminds me of a line from The Simpsons or something, you know, where like it's a what does that role mean or term, or what does it do? But it's an important term because I think vice presidency is one of the although there is a vice president there already, there's Noel Fitzroy, so there's a vice president, there's the executive vice president, but it satisfies criteria. So you've got the whole UEFA game that's being played here as well. And the UEFA card, you can argue that's a massive factor in it. And the FAI statement will say Euro 2020 is coming next year. You know, John Delaney was at the forefront of that bid. The under-17 European Championships are here this summer, or in Ireland this summer.
All quite valid arguments.
Yeah, and they will argue that, you know, he's actually heads the UEFA Youth Committee. You know, so he that's a big deal for him, and there will be an involvement there. And I think like they're fair points to raise, I guess, but we don't. Obviously, they say that this is clearly not related to the events of the past week. Now, we've had statements pretty much every day for the last week. There's really no suggestion that there isn't more statements and developments to come with regard to this subject matter. There's a hearing coming, you know, in the next couple of weeks, depending on the date, because obviously there's been talk about moving it forward, related to, you know, the Oireachtas Committee on sport, and people on that are still actively, I see, querying, discussing this. So it's not as if, again, that particular line, that story has closed. I mean, there's still developments to come with that particular story. So I take the point about the retention of someone's experience because of that. But this is another issue that's still going on that I think people aren't satisfactorily pleased that they've got all the answers they want related to a very important governance matter. So I don't think that this means that his future retention by the FI isn't going to be a talking point again as the weeks go ahead, and that this solution will be like, right, well, they've addressed that in some shape or form. I still think that the questions about his position, whatever the position may be, will hang there.
And it's only within the last hour this 1,800-word statement has been released, and people are still trying to digest it and figure out how the new FAI board is going to look. And John Delaney won't be on the board, but will sit in on board meetings, as will the new CEO, whoever that is. And as you say, there is that Dáil committee to come in a couple of weeks' time. Who goes in front of that Dáil committee now? Is it Rea Walshe, the new interim CEO, or does John Delaney, in his new role as executive vice president, still lead the FAI delegation? As you say, there's probably a lot more to go before we get to an end point and we know exactly who's running what within the FAI.
Well, yeah, or maybe not. But the FAI statement during the week said that John Delaney will lead the delegation. The FAI statement tonight says that the changes that have come tonight were planned already and have been going on. They haven't just come up. So if that's the case, then he has to go and lead the delegation, because otherwise they would have to say that they've made dramatic changes in the last couple of days that have affected it. And then that affects it with recent events when they're saying that it's not related to recent events.
These are very strong winds of change, I must say, in Gibraltar.
They're particularly strong winds. I mean, like, I think with the Rock of Gibraltar and you know, the conditions, the elements, the few doors rattling there. I mean, there's a few sirens to go off, and we've got the full set.
Well, Rock of Gibraltar brought down Manchester United, so
it's a colour writer's dream, I guess, if you have the ability to encapsulate it in such a way. But it is mad. I mean, like, you obviously had a match tonight, which in itself was a story and a struggle. But sort of being honest, like, very hard to digest the details of the match because there was something coming down the tracks, and certainly that has been the story of this trip in many respects. I mean, obviously the fans were very energised throughout the game by John Delaney's situation, even with regard to chance and so on. So again, like, I just don't think this goes away, and who knows, I mean, this time tomorrow you could have a very different discussion and debate related to maybe, you know, any further details that may emerge related to whatever matters maybe in train.
And we will have that discussion and debate on tomorrow's Off the Ball from 1 o'clock with Joe Malloy. I'm sure it'll be covered in the newspaper review as well. Dan will be back on with us over the coming week, and any developments you can get them right here on offtheball.com.